Hello, today I'm going to be talking about Calvinism and the 5 tenets of Calvinism and why I believe they are not correct. And so this can be kind of a touchy subject. People get in heated debates about it, but I do not think it has to be as complex as people put it out to be. Now, when you look at the Bible, people try to argue one way or another concerning whether Calvinism or Arminianism is correct. And I have read a lot of these verses. We are studying this right now in Bible class. And it seems that the verses can be interpreted 2 different ways. You look at total depravity. There's a counterpart in Arminianism. You look at verses like, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. An Arminian would say, of course we have fallen short of the glory of God, but that does not mean that humans are 100% evil. It's not that we came from being very good and then we all of a sudden went down to being 100% evil. There's goodness that people can recognize in humans, our love, compassion, justice, things of that nature. Those things we look at that and we say, God must have these to the fullest extent. So humans aren't 100% depraved, but there's definitely sin within us that keeps us from God. You look at the next one, unconditional election. A Calvinist would say it's based 100% on God's sovereign will. An Arminian would say, of course it's based on God's sovereign will, but that does not mean that God's sovereign will does not have a purpose. God created humans for a reason, I hope, unless if he's a sadistic God who just sits up there and kind of laughs at our struggles. You move on to limited atonement. Now this is kind of where Arminians and Calvinists have an agreement, I believe. Calvinists try to say, oh, Arminians believe in unlimited atonement. But that is not true at all. Most Arminians believe in predestination, but they believe that that predestination was based on God's foreknowledge. So if you look at it in this context, both believe in limited atonement when you look at it from this time perspective. You move on. Irresistible grace. Now this is where more difference comes into play. Calvinists believe that the Holy Spirit comes on a person and that leads them to believe. An Arminian believes somebody chooses God and then the Holy Spirit comes on them. But you can look at verses and they say the Holy Spirit, God sent the Holy Spirit on these people. And you can say, okay, well, was it before or after their belief? So you look at this and you can't really tell from the verse. And then you have perseverance of the saints. I do not see this as a Calvinist versus Arminian belief system. I believe it more a whole entire separate argument, because you see some verses people fell away from the faith, and you see other verses that say God will not pluck anybody from his hand who he has chosen and things of that nature. And so this is a completely separate argument. So I will go through each of these points and say why I believe that Calvinism does not philosophically it's not philosophically consistent. I believe biblically you can argue either way. I think there's a very subtle difference between the 2 beliefs, and therefore you're not really going to find any biblical verse that says this is what you should believe on this matter. So I'm going to go from more of a philosophical perspective. So first, total depravity. Total depravity. If we were totally depraved, not even God could save us if he was to act in his justice. And I've heard Calvinists try to explain this. God did an injustice by saving some, but not an injustice. And they just make up a word and try to make their belief match, and I don't see anything at all. You have another question with the same point. If God can do an quote-unquote injustice, why can't he apply that injustice to all if we are the same, if we are all 100% dead in our transgressions? And so this is a problem that people face when trying to argue for 100% total depravity. people can see in other people good. They can see kindness, compassion, love, justice, things of this nature, and they say, of course we're not totally depraved. There's some goodness within us. And then you go on to unconditional versus conditional election. If there is no conditional election, the creation of humanity was 100% waste of time. You see in the large scheme of things, it's God and Satan rebels, and that's the cause of evil. And so you can see there's angels that stay with God and there's angels that follow Satan. So there must be something inwardly of those angels that chose whether to stay with God or stay with Satan. Can the same apply to humanity? Could God predestine those based on either their acceptance or their predisposition to accept him, or their predisposition to rebel against him? Can this be kind of the fight of all eternity? Is this the whole meaning to humanity? If you look at a biblical perspective, I would say this is the most consistent argument, although you can argue that atheism has its advantages over it. So you move on to, never mind, one more point with unconditional election. As I said before, Calvinists would say God's sovereign will chooses. But that does not mean God's sovereign will does not have a purpose. God should have some sort of overlying purpose to his creation of humanity, unless if he is some sort of sadistic God who just enjoys watching our suffering for no apparent reason whatsoever. God should want to destroy evil and preserve good. That should be a fundamental belief and a fundamental characteristic of God. So you move on to limited atonement. As I said before, I kind of believe both Calvinists and Arminians believe this, but I think Arminianism has a better explanation for it. Calvinists would say there's limited atonement because God said there's only going to be some saved and others not. But there's no reason to believe that God would not save all if they believe that all humans are inherently the same. An Arminian, at least the Arminianism which I would be most attracted towards, would say that some people, humanity was very good at the beginning, Satan came and he ruined that. But there's still something inside of us that would either choose to rebel against God or to choose God. And so there'd be an underlying theme to why God destroys some and preserves others. In Calvinism, there's no reason whatsoever. It's just God is kind of seen as an asshole because he leaves people behind for no apparent reason. He's all-powerful. Why would he leave those people behind if there is nothing inherently bad about them, or if there's nothing inherently worse about them than the other people he chose to save? So you move on to irresistible grace. Now you look at this, I see no problem with believing one or the other. I don't really see any illogical belief in either. So I don't have a problem with the Calvinist interpretation. I have no problem with the Arminian interpretation. One problem that might arise from the Calvinistic perspective is that of people who do not hear. Actually, this would be a problem with either, is how people come to believe. An Arminian would say that belief comes from the person themselves, and that's what God predestined. Calvinists would say that God predestined first. So with either of those interpretations, you have the question, where do children go? Do children go to hell? And you have the question, where do natives go? Where do people who have never heard the gospel go when they die? And I've heard a Calvinistic response to this, and I'm guessing the Arminians don't have any better response to it. But this Calvinistic teacher said that if God really wanted those people to be saved, he would have sent a missionary to them. And so you look at that, And at first you can be like, okay, yeah, I could kind of understand that. But why does it seem that God is restrained by natural social movements? I think God would be able to kind of, if it was irresistible grace, to kind of put the Holy Spirit on those people so that they would have a deeper understanding, even without the Bible itself. The Holy Spirit should be powerful enough so that they understand those concepts. And so you look at the history of the world and you look at biblical concepts and you kind of see an inconsistency. Why does God follow social patterns? Why did he choose to not save these natives or any of these natives at all? And why does he seem to prefer people of European descent, if you're going to look at it that way? Another thing with the babies, they never chose God. So were they predestined to never grow old enough to accept God? So therefore they are burning in hell? There's no really inconsistency here. Although if you believe this, and this is, I think, the natural conclusion of what most modern Christians believe, if you believe this, that's going to lose a lot of its appeal. People are not going to emotionally connect to a God that kills babies, especially if you adopt the Calvinistic perspective, which is God killed them because of his sovereign will and not because of some sort of problem with them themselves, which there's a problem there too, but there's less so. You move on to perseverance of the saints. I don't really understand this point from either. I have seen people who 100% believe in God and then fall away from the faith because of problems that they see. They don't see logical consistency. They don't see any physical proof for it. So I don't know where Christians in general get this concept from. So if you like this video, please share, subscribe, or whatever. Do whatever you want. Have a good week, and I will see you guys next week.